Woohoo! All right, we're live. Yes. It's always that for anybody who was at the Stratos thing and or saw that 15-minute pause where we were watching a bunch of people try to figure out how to turn themselves on and off mute while hiding in another room. Hey, everybody, thanks for joining us today. My name is Kaisa Hendrickson. I'm a volunteer here with Sierra Club, but I work in technology policy and renewable energy policy. And I also live a few miles away from the Nova data center, which if you are not familiar with, is one of the largest in Utah already, which we'll talk about more later. And then I'm here with Alexis. I'll let her introduce herself.
Hello, everyone. My name is Alexis Simon-Taki. I am also a volunteer with the Sierra Club, specifically a co-chair for the legislative committee, and is just super passionate about this issue, just seeing the environmental impacts for something that I feel is not worth it. So, which I'm sure is a common feeling for most people here in this room.
Fantastic. Well, so Chris is going to advance the slides for us here in a second as we're handling the tech. So I'll just lay some groundwork really fast. So not to bait and switch, we did advertise this as talking about Stratos. We are definitely going to get into Stratos, but part of what we're going to focus on first is also just going through a bit of the history of what data centers are and why, because a lot of misinformation campaigns are being run right now on getting people confused about how and why our data is being used. Then we will get into a little bit of the environmental effects, because this is something that's happening nationally. As much as there's specific problems to Utah, to the Intermountain West area, the fight against data centers, as we'll show you in some slides, in case you don't live and breathe data centers all the time, this fight is happening everywhere. It's happening across the country with people in communities, left, right, rich, poor, everywhere along the spectrum coming together to say that tech companies have overstepped their boundaries, that local governments are no longer listening to their public, as data centers are getting approved, rolling back our climate emissions, et cetera. So Chris, we're good to go ahead and move forward. Oh, you got it. Okay. Great. Technology is always the test of where we are. Perfect. Then we're going to end up with having our wonderful guest Dita Seed here talk about what is actually happening with Stratos. Dita will give a bit of an intro, but she has been working on data centers literally for years, and so can answer all kinds of incredible questions about what's happening and what's at stake. And we'll look more broadly at what's happening across Utah. If there are two things you take away from today, one is that you are not alone in this. Utah is not alone in this. And two is that this is happening across the state, and Stratos can easily outweigh that. But these mega centers are being built in other parts of the state and need the same amount of scrutiny, the same amount of attention being put to them, because a lot of these communities do not have the tools or the knowledge to be able to fight back. So however we can all build that kind of community is the critical step forward. So with that, we can go ahead to the next one. And we're going to talk a little bit about the history of data centers, and I'll be super brief. The part that I can get kind of confused is what is a data center versus what is a hyperscale data center. And when we're talking about Stratos, we're talking about a hyperscale data center. So a traditional data center, we'll get into a bit of the timeline. Traditional data centers have been around for decades. They are used for all of our digital and computing processes. They're essentially digital infrastructure. This is how your banking happens, how your emails happen, your social media, your streaming. And it's largely been in very small, contained technology, ranging from a single building or a single room, even in a single building. There's one at the U that does testing on data centers specifically. And so that infrastructure has been around for years, and it's been evolving and shifting. But for the large part, like our energy system, it has had minor changes and evolutions, and it has had minor increases, but we haven't seen the drastic spike in growth that we've seen in the last several years. So hyperscales, and you'll hear this referred to two ways. Hyperscale data centers refer to the actual physical centers. These are massively dispersed, huge computing systems that are designed to be able to house material for thousands, tens of thousands of companies or individual processors that are being used particularly for cloud computing. And then what you'll hear the most is these are data centers being built specifically for AI. So the Nova data center in West Jordan was built explicitly for AI. Central Utah, Millard County, those ones are being built for AI purposes. That's to train and run AI systems. So when we're talking about hyperscales, there's also hyperscalers, which are the cloud computing providers that generally are using hyperscale data centers. That's going to be your Amazon warehouse or web services, your Meta, Google Cloud, and Oracle. So those are some of the hyperscalers, but you'll hear people refer to the data centers themselves as hyperscalers too. Go ahead. And then moving into a bit of the history of what happens. So again, like I said, they've been around for years. And when I was getting into this, that was illuminating because a friend of mine literally said there were arguments about data centers in the 90s when the internet was getting huge. Depending on the age bracket you fall into in this room, that may be news to you. It was news to me. So getting into some of the background, it really was initially in much more small scaled, scaling up, increasing technology capacity as opposed to increasing technology numbers. And so it's only in the 2000s when we start seeing cloud computing pick up to handle phones, internet, et cetera. And then in the 2010s, it gets even worse with the start of hyperscalers increase with the increase in streaming services. But when we get into the 2010s or 2020s, particularly 2021, is when we see the spike in these hyperscales that are designed for generative AI. So we can move on past that. And I will turn it over to
This is me, yes. Okay, so like Kaisa mentioned, before we dive into specific Utah issues, we just kind of wanted to set the foundation for what are all the different types of environmental issues that impact communities that have data centers where they live. So we this might be like more of a conversation between Kaisa and I because we're also including what we've called myths. So there's a lot of kind of like phrases, speaking points for proponents of data centers that may have you wondering, like, is this true? Is this not true? And so we're going to be addressing some of those as they apply to some of these environmental issues that we are going to be talking about. So Chris, can I go to the next slide? Okay, so the first one that we want to talk about is land. And we've been talking about these hyperscale data centers, and it's addressing the fact that there's just demand for more and more land. And we're seeing that even in this first point here on the slide, where in a two-year time period, the average acreage that's been used for data centers has increased by 144%. And because of the large scale of land that they're looking for, we're seeing that this is targeting rural areas, right? So exactly what we're seeing in Utah, we have these large areas that they feel maybe are not developed, but are being used for other things. It could be agriculture or just the fact that we've got natural wildlife habitats in these areas. And then there's been some really great, studies coming out recently. One from the University of Cambridge, where they found that the impact of the amount of energy that these types of data centers produce would actually potentially increase the temperature in the area anywhere from 4 degrees Fahrenheit up to 16 degrees Fahrenheit. So you may have seen folks talking about their concern about heat domes. That's what this is referencing. The other thing that we're seeing that's really concerning is the placement of data centers in communities that are already environmentally overburdened, right? So they're experiencing environmental issues above the median of other communities in the United States. So they could be experiencing air pollution, water pollution already. And so by adding in these data centers, we're just compounding on those environmental problems. The next issue we're going to talk about is water. So we've got a couple different components here. The first is water as an input, right? So these data centers have to use water, regardless of which type of cooling system they're using. There's also a lot of energy generation to run these servers, and all of that is just decreasing the aquifers that we have available to us. And the other really concerning thing is, as of 2022, 2/3 of data centers have been built in water-stressed areas, right? So I think Utah, again, is a great example of We're, high desert, and we are officially in a drought. And there's a lot of interest in building data centers here. There's this idea of saying that we have the water on paper, but not really addressing the fact of how much water do we actually have available to us. And then we have water as an output. So as water is being circulated through these systems, it's picking up things like chemicals, heavy metals, plastics, and the concern is that the water waste treatment facilities just don't have the capacity to treat all this water that would then be coming out, but also maybe not have the extra filtration that's needed to also filter out all these chemicals, heavy metals, et cetera. And regardless of that, the water is just going to run back into our local waterways, right? And we're already seeing that these users of data center, like Amazon, right, is already having lawsuits against them for the pollution that they're causing in these communities, right? So as of March of this year, Amazon will have to pay more than $20 million in Oregon for the pollution that they've caused.
And the Amazon lawsuit is specifically on wastewater pollution and the gray water that's coming off from these. So first myth, how many people have heard water? It's a closed loop system. You don't have to worry about water, right? It's perfect. It's great. So there's a few notes on this that we're going to address. So we can go to the next slide. The first is that, yes, sure, a closed loop system, which is a newer form of technology that is not used across all data centers, is using less water. Now, when we were talking about billions of gallons, is less enough? Second point on that is that, yes, you may be using less water. So a closed loop system means that they pull in a certain amount of water and that water is circulating around the data center to cool the servers instead of evaporative cooling, which is where they literally throw buckets of water. The NSA data center uses Utah lake water, as far as I understand, unless that has changed recently. So when you change that to a closed loop system, it is much more energy intensive. So you have to use the water going in the same circle instead of being able to pour on evaporative cooling. And doing that increases your energy costs. It's actually a more expensive process in general. So that also means the company's committing to doing something more expensive. So we need accountability if companies say that they're actually going to do a closed loop system. But so far, technology that is closed loop has not been done at any kind of major scale. So there are not examples of closed loop systems being able to handle this kind of pressure and how much energy that alone is going to take. And again, when you're using energy, whether it's solar, whether it's fossil fuels, whether it's nuclear, all of that still requires water. It's the part that never gets talked about. You have to clean off solar panels. Water's used in the whole process. Water's used in nuclear. It's used in gas turbines. So water gets used up regardless. It's just swapping where the water is getting used if you swap to a closed loop system. So it's an idea. I'll stop there.
Great segue to energy issues. Thank you. So the chart that we have here on the left is the global electricity generation for data centers. And the big takeaway that I get from this is the main reliance still on coal and natural gas, right? So data centers are actually bringing coal plants back from retirement, which is extremely expensive. And we all know that coal and natural gas is extremely polluting, right? It is not a clean energy by any means. And had some really amazing numbers here. So I wrote them down to make sure that I got them correct. So one of the things that I definitely wanted to call out was that data centers energy use tripled to 176 terawatt hours from 2014 to 2024. And energy demand is expected to double or triple again by 2028, accounting for up to 12% of the US electricity demand. So that is a 44% increase from 2014. And then Cornell University estimates that by 2030, the annual emissions could equate to 24 to 44 million metric tons of carbon dioxide, which equals 5 to 10 million cars on the road. And then we've got just a specific call out here that Stratos could increase emissions by 55%. So what does that mean for us, the people that live here and have to take on the repercussions of this energy consumption. So since 2019, we've seen a 27% increase in energy costs just nationwide. Utah has seen a 24% increase in the last 5 years. And then when we did a deep dive into, where are the largest concentrations of data centers in the US, it's Virginia. That was news to me. And they have over 560 data centers in that state. And so since 2019, Virginia has seen an increase in their electricity costs by 267%. And data centers account for almost 40% of Virginia's energy consumption. We've already kind of touched on why, coal and natural gas is costly, right? It's expensive to use to get back up on the system. And then another kind of crazy thing is that due to construction work in progress initiatives, or CWIPs, utilities can actually charge projects that have yet to be built. And as data centers require infrastructure upgrades to interconnect, these costs are already being reflected in customers' bills. So we're definitely getting the brunt of it, the short end of the stick, however you may want to say it. But yeah, we're all feeling the cost of this, just the massive amounts of energy that they need to run these data centers.
Awesome. So my next favorite myth, who's heard this one? That they're going to bring their own energy. We don't have to worry. Fantastic. Do you all feel better? Yes, that's what I thought. So next myth is that if we have data centers bringing their own energy, which this is happening across the country, that data centers are now saying, great, we'll bring our own. We don't have to worry about it. We don't have to interconnect to the grid, so ratepayers won't pay for it. That is not true. Number one being that as demand increases, costs increase. So the more that you have, as we've seen with the gas prices right now, if we are doubling, tripling, or quadrupling the demand on gas and we have not electrolyte or decarbonized by then, that's still going to be costs that we end up paying, because that means the demand for every single form of energy is going to be up. And for several of these data centers, they are using a portfolio approach where they are using geothermal, they are using solar, they are using gas, they are using diesel turbines. So they're doing a combination of those. Then obviously the next point of that, we're still going to have to breathe all of that. So again, as Alexa said, if we're rolling back data center requirements to allow companies to pollute more, which we now have data centers in Utah that have requested specifically to get exemption from the Clean Air Act, so that because they are meeting national security needs. So saying that because they are meeting national security needs, they should be exempt and allowed to pollute at a higher rate. Again, the Nova data center near Utah is allowed to use its diesel generators 42 days a year. So because these systems run 24/7, they are looking for constant generation. The other part that I always want to bring up is that building out enough renewable energy to meet this kind of demand would require clear cutting so much land. We don't have the kind of physical land to build enough solar to meet these kinds of demands in generation. So anytime somebody says that great, it can be done with renewable energy, we don't want our solar energy going that direction. Anyways, we can put that to better use.
Okay, so the last one we've got here is pollution issues. So we've gone ahead and called out 3 different categories here. So we've got air, noise, and light pollution. And so communities that live within 1 mile of a data center have increased air pollution above the national median. And you can see in our first point here, point A, that there's just going to be an increase in the number of, asthma cases, premature deaths, that is going to cause a huge public health crisis, and then just also the cost of that, which is $20 billion, right? And then Kaisa, I think, mentioned this a little bit, where the EPA has rolled back the greenhouse gas endangerment finding. So that essentially removes the scientific and legal basis that requires federal regulation of greenhouse gases, which obviously means that there's just weakening protections for everyone that is living in these areas where there's going to be these types of emissions. And then Utah itself does not have a statewide carbon emissions regulation. The other thing that I think people may not think about is the noise. These generators are running 24/7, 365, and we've started to hear folks, maybe you've seen videos online that are just showing how loud they are. So these generators are at over 100 decibels. Just for reference, 70 decibels is kind of normal, 85 is not good for humans. So we're talking about something that's well over what acceptable decibels should be. And then light pollution, right? Again, you've got these massive buildings that are all going to have lighting they're not going to turn the lighting off at night. And so as you can imagine, the disruption that happens to just natural habitat, wildlife, disruption to birds, disruption to pollinators. And then it also has the potential to just threaten any kind of dark sky ratings that we may have that people enjoy, who like to see the stars at night. Go ahead. Oh, yep.
We can skip past this. It's just an interesting anecdote from Virginia and the Vantage Data Center of how much they are estimating for public health costs down the road. The $20 billion estimate on the previous slide is, again, an early estimate. There's not a whole lot of research in terms of what the public health effects are. And there's been calls for more, but at this point, we really don't know enough other than that it's bad about what this is going to do to people's health. Oh, my favorite myth. Anyone heard this one? So this is the other set of myths that come up the most is that we have to do it to beat China, which we'll show you how we're going to beat China, and then national security issues, which is part of what we'll get to with the MIDA data center. Particularly, Wired just came out with a great article on that there is a dark money campaign running that kind of messaging, stating that it is a national security threat, that China is going to beat us in terms of AI. So if we'll go to the next slide, you can see, granted, take this with a grain of salt. We don't know how much China records or publicly makes available all of its data centers, but I somehow don't know that it's going to be above 4,000. When what they currently are estimated at, you can see the United States over here on the left and China down below at around 300 to 400. This is built centers that we know of. And again, this can also be encompassing small micro data centers, much smaller, not necessarily hyperscalers. We couldn't find that. But you can see that the US makes up nearly half of the world's data centers that we know of right now, not counting these hyperscalers being built, which begs the obvious question of then what is this for and why do we need it? Because I have yet to see from the off-takers, particularly for Stratos, who is buying that capacity and what is that going to be used for? Because we don't need that for social media. And even LLM, the ChatGPT models so far are not projecting anywhere close to this amount of use. And we will hand it off to Dita.
That was great. You did a great job. Hello, can you hear me? This is weird. So I'm going to talk to you about what's happening in Utah and what's been happening for the last few years. So can we go to the map? All right. So this is a map roughly of the Great Salt Lake Basin. Utah Lake is down here slightly cut off. But what you're seeing here, these little red dots are in this big area up here. These are state subsidized places of industrial development. And what's been happening is in 2007, MIDA was created, the Military Installation Development Authority. And what it does is it allows developers to get huge tax breaks and other kinds of benefits that fast track and incentivize development. And MIDA was conceived of by Stuart Adams, president of the Senate. At that time, I don't think he was even in the legislature, but, and Jerry Stevenson, who's a state senator. And basically what they were trying to do was to create tools to help developers. And MIDA has been quite successful in doing that. you might be aware that it's in the hotel business. They're building a very fancy hotel in Deer Valley. And the pretext here is that some military members will get reduced rate rooms or something. But this, I know. But the subsidies for this hotel in Deer Valley are huge, 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 huge. So we were actually quite surprised to see the Stratos project crop up because we thought that MITA was a hotel developer. But what happened was MITA became the template for the Utah Inland Port Authority. And the Utah Inland Port Authority is the single most destructive state entity there is in terms of fast tracking and subsidizing industrial development. And some of you may recall that in 2018, the legislature came in with a proposal to turn, where I'm pointing, this area in Salt Lake City, 16,000 acres, into a Utah Inland Port project. Oh, thank you. That's beautiful. Project area. And it was, very contested by Salt Lake City for obvious reasons, because as you can, well, so many things, but you can see that the Great Salt Lake is right here, and this is all wetland, really important, critical bird habitat, that's so essential to the Pacific Flyway. So all right, that's bad. But that's where the fight started, because what had happened is Stuart Adams and Jerry Stevenson created the Inland Port Authority basically as this tool to give developers huge tax breaks. And so it starts in Salt Lake City. And then what happens is it spreads. So they came in with this, it's only going to be in Salt Lake City. And then 2 years later, it's like, we're going to do it everywhere. Works great. And so now we've got projects areas everywhere. And I'm going to show you or point out and talk about the project areas in the Great Salt Lake Basin that are showing up on this map. And then I have some other maps to show you that show some of this area up close. And we'll also talk about what's happening in Iron County and Millard County. But here in Salt Lake City, there are data centers being proposed, but mostly that is all a huge warehouse district. That's how it's being planned. Oh, and then there's an ICE warehouse detention facility that's in here too. That's an atrocity that we need to stop, but that's a different story. Okay, so up here, this area is 9,000 acres, Utah Inland Port project area in the Weber Basin. So the Weber Basin is, as you may be reading in the news, an incredibly water-strapped area. The aquifer there, it has been drawn down a lot. They just said at a legislative committee hearing that they have enough culinary water for their customers for 2 years in their reservoir, and that this year they're going to draw it down. And if next year is as bad as this year, then they don't have any water to drink. That's how serious this is. And it's in this backdrop that we have our governor talking about the Stratos data center like it's no big thing and no problem, really? We're in a serious crisis with regard to our water resources, serious. And none of this incentivized fast track stuff should be happening in areas that have these very limited water resources. But of course, guess what they want to build here? Oh, and this is just full of wetlands, and it's right in between two state wildlife or waterfowl management areas. Half of it's wetlands. Data centers. Everybody wants a data center. So that is an area that we have to watch. Now, over here, let's just go down to the Tooele Valley. So right here is a data center proposal that is being put forth by a developer named Chuck Ackerlow. Mr. Ackerlow went to federal prison in the 1990s for failing to pay federal excise tax on diesel. He was also the chair of the Republican Party in the 80s. Here he is now developing a data center complex right on the shores of Great Salt Lake. And guess what? He wants a 500 megawatt gas power plant right there in those wetlands, right on the shores of Great Salt Lake. And also, he's going to have a reverse osmosis treatment plant right there that's going to send reject water, which is, you heard about that from these two amazing women, right into the wetlands of the Great Salt Lake. Does that sound like a good plan? No. And he said this very proudly. The only reason he can do this is because of the Utah Inland Port Authority and these subsidies that he's getting. So we, the taxpayers, are enabling this project that is going to be like, it's a cancer on the shore. This whole area where my magic wand is pointing is wetlands. And we're losing these wetlands. So all of these proposals along these edges are, wetlands. Why is nobody developed in wetlands? It's expensive. You have to fill them in. So these are the last places, but these are also the last places for our birds. And we are so in danger of losing a huge amount of wetlands. I mean, we're in danger of losing, bird species in all of this mess. So I get quite upset when I think about it too hard. So over here, right here, is Josh Romney's Inland Port project. He wants data centers too. Do you know who Josh Romney is? Son of Mitt. He is now the head of Great Salt Lake Rising, and he says he's going to save the lake. Yet here he is developing right on the edge of wetlands, and the Tooele Valley is out of water. So you heard the term over-allocated. That means that there is more paper water than real water, and that is the circumstance in the Tooele Valley. So there isn't the water to support all the development that all the developers want to see happen here. But the subsidized stuff is going to get built first. Okay, then let's see. Over here, you can't really see it, but down here in Spanish Fork, there's another fairly large project area on the shores of Provo Bay, very near an area where scientists are working to restore the June sucker, an endangered fish species. And actually this year, the creek that they're working on, Hobble Creek, is supposed to go dry because our water situation is so terrible. But anyway, some of the biggest names in the state in development want to build data centers down there on the shores of Utah Lake. Surprise. Pretty much anywhere there's a developer. Oh, and there's more. Okay, so up here is the Bear River Migratory Bird Refuge. Here and here are inland port project areas. Now, I'm not sure if this is going to be data centers, but it's definitely industrial development that is incentivized and fast-tracked with taxpayer dollars. It's happening right near the Bear River Migratory Bird Refuge. And of course, up here is Stratos, which we'll talk about in a minute. The weird thing about Stratos is that they added this little rectangle, which is has a piece of federal property, the Utah Training and Test Range, the UTR, and then a piece of state trust lands. And it's not at all clear what that's for. So it's a little weird. And it could be that it's just the pretext for them to be able to say, look, it's a military project, see, right there, because there isn't anything up there. They're saying that the money generated from this somehow is going to help Hill Air Force Base build new buildings. Doesn't seem like we should be incentivizing that since we already pay federal taxes. So, okay, let's go to the next slide. We'll zoom in on some of this stuff. Oh, so this is a map of the National Wetland Inventory. I just want, you can see the Stratos project. Here's Locomotive Springs, but there are wetlands all in here. going, this is the area they say they want to develop first, and you can see it contains wetlands. So, you know, it just kind of gives you the scale of where there are wetlands here. Now, these are in many cases ephemeral wetlands, so they're not wet all the time, but they're critically important for birds. And then also this obviously is Great Salt Lake. Okay, next slide. Okay, now we're just going to talk for a minute about the Stratos project. So when this landed, you know, we were all surprised because you know, some of us subscribed to the agendas for, or notices, meeting notices for MIDA. And now if you look at their meeting notices, you would never, you know, you see the word Stratos, you would never understand that it was something of this scale. So it is absolutely huge. And the process that they went through to adopt it was atrocious and very opaque. And, you know, we're seeing the results of that. But there are a couple things to note here. This yellow line is the Ruby pipeline that is supposed to be the source of the natural gas for, you know, they're giving us various numbers in, but you know, a 9 gigawatt gas power plant or something. It's just all over the place with their numbers. But anyway, they're saying that the natural gas is going to come from the Ruby pipeline. But then they also are backtracking and saying, oh, no, wait, we'll do some solar. The bottom line here is that they are not telling a consistent story. It's changing all the time, and we have no reason to trust them. This here is Locomotive Springs, so it's a state waterfowl management area, and it is in deep trouble right now due to lack of water resources. And this development will kill it off for sure. So this aquifer up here, just like the aquifer in the Tooele Valley, is probably over-allocated. And you know, we need to understand the hydrology of the area before we commit public resources to a project like this. But we also need to understand the other consequences of this, because as was discussed earlier, there's, you know, energy takes water too. And so there are some trade-offs, and sometimes the trade-offs result in things that are, you know, even worse for the innocent bystanders who live in the adjacent communities. And all of us, of course, in the Wasatch Front want to see Great Salt Lake survive. And this takes us in the wrong direction. Okay, let's go to the next slide. So I think I have one in here of the Cedar Valley, which is like the, well, this will show you land ownership. So you can see that, so this yellow is BLM land. And you can see that this chunk up here is really well surrounded by BLM land. And in one of my other slides, I had the layers that show priority habitat for sage grouse. Sage grouse is an imperiled bird. There is sage grouse habitat up there. And it's going to be destroyed by this development if it happens. And, you know, that also takes us in the wrong direction. Also, it's an area that has very big herds of pronghorn, and I guess I'm not a hunter, but hunters love that area because of the big herds of pronghorn. Pronghorn need wide open spaces, buildings, and all the light pollution. You know, that's just a disaster for them. So this would be devastating to wildlife. Not the least, you know, I don't know if you've seen the renderings of what the Stratos people are proposing to build, but these giant glass walls. Mm-hmm. This is an area that is full of migratory birds, and giant glass walls are the wrong thing. Even like they're saying, oh, it'll be bird friendly. Well, you know, we don't trust you on that, because so far you've not been straight with anything else. So no to that. Okay, let's go to the next slide. Okay, this is This is okay, this is a good one to show. This is the inland port area on Utah Lake that I was talking about. And here's Provo Bay, and Hobble Creek is like right in there. Goes right up to the edge. That's all bird habitat too. So that's kind of a disaster. But over here on the west, this is western Utah County. This is Data Center Alley right now in Utah. And the scary thing that's happening is that because of a law that was passed in 2025, sponsored by Senator Scott Sandell of Box Elder County, any data center developer can build their own power plant, and they're saying they're going to do it. And the problem with this is that if you start to add up all of these power plants, that is a lot of pollution. And remember, this area just got out of non-attainment status for PM 2.5. This stuff will throw it right back to where people in Utah County have really unhealthy air. And think about Eagle Mountain. So Eagle Mountain is like one of the fastest growing communities in the United States. And they're about to be the epicenter of massive pollution from these power plants. And so I have 5 here. There's one more that I just read about today that they want 1,700 megawatts, 1.7 gigawatts, I guess that is. Huge over here. So it's called Tract. It's a company that sites data centers, Tract Pole Canyon over here. So that's a catastrophe. So Brian Minch from Utah Physicians for a Healthy Environment and I met with Bryce Burt, who's the director of the Division of Air Quality. And he told us there's not much he can do about it. They're permitting these one by one by one, so they're not looking at the cumulative impact. And that is a real tragedy. So this is the disaster unfolding right now. These power plants are getting permitted. This one is, the Lake Mountains are right here. This one is in Mosida. But yeah, they're all for data centers. Then let's go to the next slide. I can tell you about some of the other ones. Oops, no, okay. We'll go back to that one or whatever, doesn't matter. So there are some other places. So the Utah Inland Port Authority with its fast track incentivization is now attracting data center developers like there's no tomorrow. Every day it's a new proposal. So there's one in Duchesne County at the top of 9 Mile Canyon in an inland port project area. There's a local group. Oh, it's called the 9 Mile Data Center, but there's a local group that's formed there to fight back against it. That would also probably impact sage grouse habitat. You know, definitely there's lots of wildlife habitat up there. And then there are going down south, down the Great Basin south toward Washington County, there are data center proposals in each of those counties. So, except maybe Juab, but Millard County has huge proposals. Now, some of them maybe are not as objectionable. Well, like the one that is in Delta, that is, they're trying to use existing power sources, but some of them are just huge. And all of this is speculative too. A lot of it is speculative. In Iron County, they just passed the county commission just passed a 6-month moratorium. And we were talking earlier, speculating about why they did that. Might be to get through the election and then go back to approving data centers. But Iron County is an area that has a serious water crisis. And they are so over allocated, they're going to be curtailed soon. And, here they have 2 huge data center proposals. One was just put on hold with this moratorium. The other one, surprise, sponsored by the Inland Port Authority. So we've got a lot of work to do. But the good news, oh, and then let me just tell you about some of the things that we're doing to push back against the Stratos data center. So, they need water to build, and they put forth initially a water right, a 1,900 acre feet change application. And the community pushed back against that with 4,000 people almost protesting and another 8,000 writing comment letters in opposition. And so the developers pulled that water right change application, and was a way of wiping the slate clean. But then they had another one in the works that was for a much smaller amount, 11 acre feet. And we did the same thing with that one where people protested. It was up to about 700 people, and they pulled it today, just this afternoon. So the good news there is that that is not the action of like a really successful and like we've got a great plan and everything's going great data center developer, right? If you're pulling your water rights because thousands and thousands of people are protesting. It's just actually really amazing and good because we've got them on the run right now. Now what we're going to have to do is, stay with it. We can't give up because they will come back with more proposals. The other thing that is happening is a referendum, a ballot referendum. We'll find out tomorrow whether the county attorney in Box Elder County is going to allow that to happen. If it does, they need volunteers, and it could be the way to undo the Stratos project. It's not totally clear, but if it will result in that, but it's definitely a worthy effort. And what's interesting is that Utah's political leadership is starting to split on this issue. So Governor Cox was all, how dare you question this? And then he was like, well, maybe I should have said that. And now he's like, oh, it's going to be small to start with. Schultz is like, Speaker Schultz is like now saying, oh, we need a study. And I'm not sure I like this. And my ranch is right there. And but he wants to be governor. And, they can all read the polling data, and the polls are not on the side of yay data centers. And then there's Stuart Adams. We haven't really heard much from him, so I don't know. He might be in hiding. So we'll see. We were talking earlier about what, and I'll hand this off in a minute, like what we can do. One of the things we need to do is to make this an election issue and to ask candidates what their positions are on this and to really hold them accountable. So I think that's enough blabbing from me. I'll hand it off.
No.
Sorry.
Thank you so much, Dita.
So weird.
Fantastic. I'll put that back. So can I get a round of applause? Thank you so much, Dita. Incredible wealth of knowledge. Thank you so much for sharing. That was more than I think any of us could have known that we didn't know. Yes, Dita, could you do it quick, like who you are?
I work for the Center for Biological Diversity, a fine organization, and we work a lot with the Sierra Club, another fine organization.
So thank you again so much. We'll be finishing up here so that we can get to questions, but we did want to circle back on, Dita provided that fantastic detail on the newer ones that are proposed. Wanted to get into what's currently exists and been proposed. If you can do the math between this slide and the previous slide, those don't equal the same numbers. I found 4 different sets of numbers of how many data centers there are in Utah versus how many are proposed. This is not even, we can't claim it's a national security issue if we don't even know how much is happening or where or when it's happening. So this is, again, information that was from last year when the giga site, the Delta giga site in Millard was going to be the biggest in the state at the time. And you can see that the nice little NSA data center is all down at the bottom, super small. So this is kind of where we are, and we can move to the next one. Back to that key takeaway that I had, which was this is not just us. The exciting thing is this is bringing environmental justice groups, community-based organizations, NGOs, government agencies across the country. Particularly, we're seeing in Utah more information about people starting to ask questions, how these data centers are being done. You can now see there's ABC4 made an interactive map. Lots of data center developers have interactive maps. Take that with a grain of salt. And then Aaron Brockovich has stepped into the fight and now has created a community reporting data center website for people to report on data centers that are projected, on things that are being whispered about, because a lot of data center information is being done under non-disclosure agreements. So government officials are signing NDAs that public does not know about. So hear those, check those out. That's again where we will have an action alert for folks to sign up for a notification from Sierra Club. So we're going to start sending out push notifications and actions specifically on data centers. So we can skip on past to the next one. So what we're doing and what you can do about it. Here's where the fun is. First, you can sign up for Sierra Club. You can use this link just to see what's happening here. And I will hand it over to Frankie real fast to share a little bit more.
Hey, everyone. Thanks so much for joining. I'm the chapter director here, and I'm really just proud of our team. This is our newly formed data center team that put this on May 4th. Myself and a few other volunteers. Chris was there. Alexis, were you there? There were a few. Was it Natalie? You guys, you were there. There were a few volunteers who came to Box Elder County to the hearing, and Dita was there on May 4th. It was really a formative moment. Who else was there on May 4th in Box Elder County? It was heavy, right? And so they refused to allow us to speak, and they made their vote and they made their decision, and it hit hard. You just felt the emotional pressure in the room. So we reached out as a team to our volunteers and said, who wants to do some work around this? And Kaisa, Alexis, Alyssa, everyone here that's a volunteer, Catherine, thank y'all so much for just stepping up and stepping into this work. So what's coming up at the Utah chapter? There's a lot to do. We have several teams. So we're inviting you all to jump onto that QR code, which is going to take you to our link tree. And you're going to see upcoming events, upcoming actions. We have conservation efforts. We have energy efforts. We have this data center work that's happening, and you can jump on and you can volunteer, you can give, you can support and jump into the movement here. A couple things that are coming up on the conservation area is that there is a Grand Staircase Escalante vote that's happening nationally that would strip Grand Staircase Escalante of its resource management plan. And that's absolutely appalling. There's a lot of misinformation happening there. We've been putting a lot of pressure nationally because it's going to be our national legislators across the board who are going to be able to push back about it, because Celeste Malloy and Mike Lee are pretty fixed on how they feel about it. We have a roadless rule. It has not been dropped yet. We've got a couple of roadless rule t-shirts. It looks like you all are at the event that happened and earlier this month. And so for the roadless rule, we're waiting for Donald Trump to put down his decree to go ahead and remove the roadless rule, and then we'll have another comment period. We're going to keep you all updated. So if you want to be updated on how you can act on ways to protect our wild spaces, then that's our information. One more thing that's coming up is Utah Renewable Communities, which is a vote that's been going out in select cities. And I think someone had some updated information on the next vote on that. Who was going to mention when we can vote next on that? Okay, let me see if I got it, because I don't think this person's here. When you go online, you're going to see the couple of communities that are left to vote. I believe it's Kearns. And so if you live in the Kearns area and you want to have renewable energy in your home. Catherine, did I get that? Is that ringing a bell? Okay. Okay.
I heard Kearns was a no.
Yeah,
Oh,
Kearns is
okay.
doing a survey. Okay. Hey, yeah. Okay. And just to give that context, that's for a program called Utah Renewable Communities. Several cities across the state of Utah have been voting to allow the ability to have ease of implementing renewable communities and renewable energy opportunities in your home. So that's solar panels and different ways to bring renewable energy into your home and have that supported and subsidized. So there's lots of ways for you all to engage. There's outings, there's socials. I'd love to see you all continued events, and thank you all to all the volunteers that poured in the work to make this happen.
Thank you. I realize I should have had Frankie go last because I can't follow that up. But we do have two more quick things to highlight. So just real fast, because I should have moved this up a little bit higher. This is a map of groups that are pushing back, fighting back, and organizing against data centers across the country. So these are groups that are pursuing either activist groups, ones that are trying to get partitions, and then you can see in green all of the spots that have over 50 megawatt projects coming up. So this is on the website Data Center Watch. Recommend checking it out.
I want to give a round of applause. Just like, let's clap it up for just that energy right now in this moment. Like, thank you all. Can you raise your hand if you did the $15 water rights protest? We are showing up and showing out. So yeah, we're not alone.
Yes, exactly. Like this part of any authoritarian rule is making sure people feel isolated, and you're not isolated. We are not isolated. And again, this is a national movement. Their data centers are being fought in Arizona and New Mexico. So little highlights of Idaho just passed some regulation controlling data centers. North Dakota just passed. So Idaho is, where's my Idaho? I have Idaho on here somewhere. Maybe I missed Idaho. One of our team members is currently in Idaho, and so shared the great exciting news.
Yeah.
There's a regulation one coming out of South Dakota, and Pennhurst just put out some regulation around their data centers and calling this an insult to humanity to try and build these kind of things. Oh, so yeah.
So you guys will know who you're up against. The tech giant is going to spend $640 billion on tech center on data centers. Amazon has gross revenues of $740 billion. So Amazon's a $20 million fine. They make that in less than 2 hours, and they have unbelievable resources. But what we have is the people. So we will win. It's just this battle has to be won at the local level, because obviously the federal government has been bought and paid for by billionaires, so that's hopeless. But at the local level, these tech giants can be defeated. They're lying about everything. Whenever they want to have something passed, they'll go, "We need it for national security." The data centers in China, some of them were built by IBM, So, none of you guys here buy any of the lies. The country can't afford it. We're over $39 trillion in debt, and that debt is continuing to increase. The economy is being propped up by all of these data centers, and at a certain point, you have market saturation, because this happens often in history. In the 1800s, they were building lots of railroads, of course. Most of them went bankrupt. And then at the turn of the century, you had all kinds of automobile companies. Most of those went bankrupt. And then you had a whole move for airlines. Most of those went bankrupt. And of course, all of you here are old enough to remember the internet bubble. So our country is in massive debt, has an illegal war, and it's being propped up with these data centers. At a certain point, how much more data do you need? What can you do with that? And there's a big flaw in their thinking, because with quantum computing, all of these data centers are going to be obsolete as soon as quantum computing takes off.
Thank you so much.
Danny, do you want to mention where you're from?
I'm Danny Quintana. I'm the president of the Global High Seas Marine Preserve. We work out of Hawaii, and our Intermountain office is here in Utah, because I live here part of the time. And our goal is to protect 100% of the oceans. The BBNJ treaty advocates protecting 30% of the oceans. Well, that's like, okay, let's only give women the right to vote in 30% of the planet. So, and right now we're proposing a 5-year moratorium on all industrial commercial fishing, because if we are able to get this moratorium in place, which of course is going to take a lot of effort, then what will happen is the forage fish, the anchovies, sardines, haddock, all the small fish, they reproduce in a hurry. So if we leave them alone, they'll come back, and then the prey fish, the predators, can start to come back. Part of the reason you're seeing so many dead whales is because not only the plastic, but they're running out of prey. And with global climate change, which, by the way, is not a Chinese conspiracy, we need to really address these issues at the local level. And we will, so share our website, savingoceans.org. And if any of you have any questions, just come up to me after. Thank you.
So much. So Idaho. For anyone who grew up in Utah knows that Utah only has a few places it can make fun of. Idaho's one of them. Not on that one. Yeah, so we're good to move in. We can move into the last part. I just wanted to flag, or the last slide is just that we are a newly formed sub-team at Sierra Club working on data centers across the state. Our focus is going to be an education campaign and creating a community that is working on this, that is uniting people under an umbrella that have normally not been invited or felt invited into the same space to work on this, because across the state, everybody is on the same page. So working on that broader community and getting the communication out to the public about data centers, particularly in rural and more remote parts of the state, doing education campaigns and creating toolkits, and then likewise trying to drive political action at both the state and municipal level. Municipalities have a lot of power in this opportunity, or a lot of pressure too. So if you are interested, if you sign up to volunteer with Sierra Club and indicate that you want to join the Utah Needs Clean Energy team, and indicate data centers, or put in the notes data centers, or when you sign in over here, put data centers, we will get you onto our data center sign up team. So thank you all so much.